Tonight, the national response.
Came out of nowhere.
The president approves a massive spending package to fight the global outbreak.
We don't have enough tests today.
As the coronavirus sends ripples through financial markets across the globe.
And
This is real devastation.
the president surveys the scene of a tornado-ravaged Tennessee.
Election 2020, the next contest in the Democratic race, as the fight for the nomination boils down to a two-man showdown.
A prayer goes viral for the wrong reasons.
Plus,
I think that's probably a black hole that we shouldn't go down.
why the peace deal with the Taliban hasn't stopped the fighting in Afghanistan.
All this and more on Faith Nation.
Another death, a link to the coronavirus. Welcome to Faith Nation. I'm Jenna Browder.
And I'm Ben Kennedy in for John Jessup. This latest death in Washington state brings the U.S. death toll to 12. Worldwide, there are more than 100,000 cases.
Here in the United States, Maryland now has a confirmed case, and many other states are bracing to combat the virus too. Today, President Trump signed a bill approving $8.3 billion in funding to fight the disease.
I asked for 2.5, and I got 8.3, and I'll take it.
The president acknowledging the force of the virus.
But it's an unforeseen problem. What a problem. Came out of nowhere, but we're taking care of it.
Meanwhile, off the coast of San Francisco, the Coast Guard dropped off testing kits to the Grand Princess cruise ship to screen potentially infected passengers and crew.
If we've been exposed, we've been exposed, and there's not much we can do about it.
In Washington, the state hardest hit, with at least 70 people infected and 11 confirmed dead. Some schools are sanitizing classrooms daily or closing to prevent the spread. And in New York, at least 1,000 people are under self-quarantine as more cases are discovered.
I'm perturbed that people get anxious every time the number goes up. The number has to go up if you continue to test.
Vice President Pence elbow bumping Washington's governor. And visiting a medical mask production facility in Minnesota promises the full resources of the federal government are being brought to bear to control the virus, but admits vulnerabilities.
We don't have enough tests today to meet what we anticipate will be the demand going forward.
And without enough testing kits, local communities are weighing how to respond. In Central Virginia, health officials are developing criteria for testing the disease.
There may be people in our community who have mild symptoms, who don't meet those criteria, who we're not going to test, but may actually have the virus.
There is some good news, though. The number of cases in South Korea and China is dropping, raising hopes that the virus can be contained.
Well, joining us now for a gut check on the severity and fears surrounding the outbreak is CBN News medical reporter Lori Johnson. Lori, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure. Nice to be here.
Nice to have you. Well, break it down for us. How worried should we be here?
How worried should you be? The answer to that is simple. Not at all, because Jesus told us, do not worry. Also, doctors say do not worry, because worry is a form of stress, and stress kills, especially chronic stress. That's stress that goes on for a long period of time. So when we're talking about worrying about this coronavirus for days and weeks on end, that actually lowers our body's immune system, our body's immune response, our ability to fight diseases. So worry actually can make us sick. Now, there's a big difference between worry and concern. So how concerned should we be? The World Health Organization says the death rate from this coronavirus is a little bit more than 3%, but they say that death rate is likely to go down as more people are tested. The CDC and the NIH agree, because the more people are tested, the more mild cases are discovered. Because remember, when we talk about the death rate, it's this very simple math problem. You're looking at how many people have the disease compared to what percentage of those people die from it. For example, in South Korea, they're doing massive testing there. They've tested 140,000 people, and they've discovered 6,000 cases. That's a lot. But the death rate in South Korea is less than 1%. The death rate from the flu is about the same, less than 1%. So when we start testing more people in the United States, we're likely to see more cases, but the death rate is likely to come down. Right now, it's at about 5% in the United States.
Yeah, Lori, how does the death rate from COVID-19 compare to other outbreaks like SARS or H1N1?
It's really interesting. SARS was in 2002, and SARS was a coronavirus. But it's very different from this one in that only 8,000 people total got it, but 800 people died from it. So that's 10%. That's a very high death rate. So obviously, scientists were very concerned about it at the time, and they developed a vaccine. In the meantime, SARS went away. It just disappeared, and they thought, well, it's probably seasonal. It'll come back next year, and when it does, we'll be ready with a vaccine. And guess what? It never came back. Scientists still don't know to this day where it went, why didn't it come back? But nobody's complaining. So that's SARS. And then H1N1, that was 10 years ago. That was the swine flu. That was the last time there was a worldwide pandemic. And remember, the coronavirus right now is not a pandemic yet, but that was 10 years ago, and that was a flu. And so again, it was seasonal, and scientists developed a vaccine. And since then, every single year, the swine flu has come back and is part of the seasonal flu and part of the seasonal flu vaccine as well.
And Lori, talking about concern, the elderly have to be a bit more careful, though, right?
Yeah, it's really interesting. The H1N1, the swine flu, that particular flu struck young people. 80% of the people who died were under age 65. Usually the flu, 80% of the people who die are over 65. With the coronavirus, we're seeing the same thing as with most flus. The people who are most at risk are older people, especially older people who have underlying health conditions like a heart problem or a lung problem, and then some younger people who also have compromised immune systems, like people who are undergoing chemotherapy for cancer.
All right, medical reporter Lori Johnson. Thank you, Lori.
My pleasure.
Well, President Trump, thank you, Lori. President Trump toured tornado damage in Tennessee today. An EF4 tornado killed at least 25 people when it hit a 50-mile wide part of the state. It is the nation's most intense twister in nearly 3 years.
This is real devastation, like you'll never see, hopefully, again. This was about as big a tornado as you can have. It was 50 miles long, which is extraordinarily long, and a very wide one. And you see what's happened. We saw it from the helicopter.
Now, the president's visit comes on the heels of the White House approving a disaster declaration to free up federal funds to those affected by the tornado. CBN's Operation Blessing is on the scene working to clear debris and help those in need.
To election 2020, with Elizabeth Warren out, the Democratic primary is now a two-man race. The next big test for Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders coming Tuesday, when voters in 6 states, including the all-important Michigan, go to vote. Today, President Trump gave his analysis on Warren.
People don't like her. She's a very mean person, and people don't like her. People don't want that. They like a person like me that's not mean. Okay, I'll see you guys.
And responding to a question over sexism in the race, the pundit-in-chief said the Massachusetts senator suffered from, quote, a tremendous lack of talent, before adding that she was a good debater.
And here now for our Faith Nation political panel, Julia Manchester covering the 2020 race for the Hill, and CBN's chief political analyst, David Brody. My first question is for Julia. The issue of sexism, did it cost Warren the election?
You know, I think whenever any woman runs for elected office here in the United States, or really in any country in the world for that matter, they do face a degree of sexism. There were a couple of moments on the campaign trail where there was blatant sexism against Elizabeth Warren. For example, in January, there was an NBC News Wall Street Journal poll that showed head-to-head matchups with Mike Bloomberg, Joe Biden, Bernie Sanders against Trump. Elizabeth Warren, despite the fact that she was in the top 5, was left out of that. You know, I think she also, like many of the other female candidates faced maybe tougher media scrutiny. You know, she had a lot of similar policies to Senator Bernie Sanders, yet she seemed to get a bit more scrutiny for that. That being said, she did have her own flaws. She wasn't really able to expand her base. It was mostly white, suburban, women in particular, but white college-educated people, you know, very much highly educated academics, et cetera. She wasn't able to expand that, unlike Bernie Sanders, who was really able to tap into the Latino vote to expand his progressive base. So sexism definitely played a role, but it wasn't the only thing that really caused her to drop out.
And now we're all looking to Tuesday, and in particular Michigan. David, if Biden does well in Michigan, is that end of the game for Bernie Sanders?
Well, look, there's a school of thought to say yes, because Michigan is white, blue collar, white working class, all of that. But I think he'll probably stay in. It depends how bad he gets beat in Michigan, too. If it's close, he doesn't get out. If it's a blowout in Michigan, I think he's got to really seriously reevaluate. Then again, we've talked about this just in. Biden's a gaffe machine, so you never know. Plus, March 15th, you got the debate one-on-one coming up between the two of them. That's an opportunity for him. So my guess, if I had a wager, which I don't, by the way, but if I had a wager, I would say he stays in regardless of Michigan.
Julia, looking ahead to Tuesday, building off David's point there, Elizabeth Warren, do you think she'll make an endorsement by then? And if she does, what kind of impact will that have on the race?
It's highly doubtful that she will make an endorsement before then. You know, if you look back to 2016, it took her months. You know, she waited, I believe, until around the time of the conventions, if not after, to endorse Hillary Clinton. She's in a very tough place. Ideologically, she matches up with Bernie Sanders. However, there is a lot of tension between her and Sanders right now. There has been a lot of attacks from people saying they are his supporters against her, and even though Sanders has condemned that, they've still had their scuffs up, you know, a couple of scuffles on the campaign trail with Biden. Obviously, tension there, especially when Biden was a senator and she was talking about financial issues. There were some major disagreements there. However, I would say she's probably more of an establishment progressive than Bernie Sanders. So my bet is that she waits until we have a clearer idea who the nominee is, or until after the convention.
Do you think she could get a cabinet position or some sort of position in either of their administrations?
It's very possible. It's very possible. We'll have to see.
Yeah. You know, last night, President Trump, he was in a town hall with Fox News, and it was really interesting. There were a lot of interesting moments, but he said that he didn't want to call Joe Biden Sleepy Joe, as he normally calls him, out of respect, because he thinks that Joe Biden will be the Democratic nominee. David, are we going to see a President Trump handle Joe Biden with kid gloves if they both get to the general election?
Absolutely not. No way. There's no way he's going to do that. And here's a couple of reasons why. One, he's Donald Trump, and this thing about out of respect for Joe Biden, that didn't make any sense to me. No, I don't think he's going to do that. But two, Joe Biden's, will give as good as he takes. I mean, he's a brawler too. So I think this thing's going to get nasty if indeed that's the general election fight.
Julia, how does that work, though? You know, if Joe Biden, if he's talking about a return to decency, but he gets down in the mud, if you will, with Donald Trump, how does he play that?
You know, I think he's going to have to be very careful going forward. If you look back to the Republican primary, we saw Marco Rubio was talking quite a bit about decency. Well, he got very down in the mud with Donald Trump, and we saw what happened there. So I think Joe Biden will probably take some advice from his good friend Michelle Obama and take the when they go low, we go high approach. But he'll still definitely be trying to act like a tough guy like he has in the past. You know, in 2016, he would take shots at President Trump on the campaign trail. So I think you could definitely see some feistiness between the two.
No one can sling mud as well as Donald Trump.
We'll end on that point. David, Julia, thank you both for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you. And David, stick around. Coming up after the break, social media mocking the vice president for his prayer about the coronavirus. David breaks down the controversy.
Come home to the sounds of Southern Gospel from CBN Radio. You'll enjoy a rich Southern blend of bluegrass, classic gospel, and Southern gospel favorites like the Gaithers, the Crab Family, and bluegrass sounds like Mountain Faith. So make yourself at home with the all-new CBN Southern Gospel. Now available at cbnradio.com.
Meet the pastors who are preaching the gospel in a fresh, fearless way. I'm Roberto Torres Cedillo. Join me each week for Next Gen Voices. and watch God transform a generation.
Prophecy thousands of years old.
We were called to be a light to the world.
Being fulfilled today. Discover how. Get to life. Call 1-800-700-7000.
We consider it our duty to reach out and help others around the world.
For a gift of $10 or more, you can own the acclaimed CBN documentary To Life. Just call 1-800-700-7000 or log on to cbn.com.
To treat a human, no matter what he is, which religious he has, which color he is, this is what I'm doing.
See how the people of Israel are fulfilling prophecy.
History is being written, and I want to be a part of it.
By sharing their knowledge.
In Africa, in Asia, in South America, in East Europe.
And their love.
This is how we work. This is us.
Get to life. Call 1-800-700-7000 or log on to cbn.com.
Vice President Pence is known as a man of prayer, but a photo of him this week, you might have seen it, leading a prayer about the coronavirus is getting a lot of pushback.
Well, critics say praying for a solution is not the answer and calling for the VP to turn to doctors and to medical professionals for their expertise in the matter. The picture seen here of the coronavirus emergency team praying went viral. CBN News Chief Political Analyst David Brody breaks down the controversy.
In today's divisive and toxic culture, not even a simple prayer is immune to criticism, especially when it comes from the Vice President, Mike Pence, who of course takes his faith very seriously. So there he was, praying this week for God's guidance regarding combating the coronavirus. But apparently that's controversial to some. That's right. Thomas Chatteron Williams, he's a writer for New York Magazine and Harper's Magazine. He tweeted about that photo and it took off like wildfire. Here's the provocative tweet. Quote, Mike Pence and his coronavirus emergency team praying for a solution. We are so screwed. And then there's a tweet by Brian Karem. He's a White House correspondent, but he chimed in with this commentary. Quote, clear that the VP and real Donald Trump are in over their heads. POTUS is literally praying for a miracle to make coronavirus go away. And the snark on Twitter goes on and on and on, as you might imagine. Look, we as Christians know that prayer is an act of surrender. And when you saw Mike Pence praying in that photo, he's praying for guidance, and that's it. He's not praying for the coronavirus to, magically go away. And so, this idea that it's actually being criticized is relatively ridiculous. Now, I did talk to Mike Pence about praying specifically in the White House. He says prayer goes on all the time in the White House. We talked about that 2 years ago in May of 2018. Have a look.
There's prayer going on a regular basis in this White House. And it's one of the most meaningful things to me is whether it's public meetings or not. I've lost count of the number of times that the president's nudged me or nudged another member of the cabinet and said, let's start this meeting with prayer. He's someone who really believes in the power of prayer and in the importance of faith in American life. You saw that in high relief at the White House today, but it's not just on the National Day of Prayer.
It really should come as no surprise that past administrations, really from the founding of our country, have relied on prayer during times of national crisis. Take President Clinton, for example. In the mid-1990s, as America was preparing to invade Haiti, Clinton's speechwriter wrote a line, and it said this: no president makes decisions like this one without deep thought. But Clinton said something was missing, and he told the speechwriter to add the word prayer, so it read thoughts and prayers at the end, not just thoughts. And then, of course, the Civil War. During the brutal and bloody Civil War, Abraham Lincoln could only look to God. This is what he said, quote, I have been driven many times upon my knees by the overwhelming conviction that I had nowhere else to go. My own wisdom and that of all about me seemed insufficient for that day. And then, of course, JFK, Roman Catholic, known to head straight to St. Matthew's Cathedral across the street from the White House for prayer constantly during the Cuban Missile Crisis. And then, of course, how can we not leave out Jimmy Carter, President Jimmy Carter, the Southern Baptist Sunday school teacher. It's like he's been teaching Sunday schools ever since he got out of the womb. He talked extensively about praying for wisdom when trying to break an impasse between Anwar Sadat, a Muslim, and Menachem Begin, a Jew, at the famous Camp David peace accords. And then finally, Gerald Ford, he turned to the Bible. As Richard Nixon's resignation was nearing, he was about to become president, Ford and his son actually began reading from Proverbs 3, 5, and 6, where it talks about trusting in the Lord with all your heart and leaning not on your own understanding. So the bottom line here, Mike Pence's prayer, not unusual in any way. As a matter of fact, it's as American as it gets. David Brody, CBN News, Washington.
All right, thank you, David. Still ahead, why the U.S. Taliban peace plan hasn't put an end to the fighting in Afghanistan. You're watching CBN's Faith Nation.
Too often, we carry baggage from our past. You know what it's like. It affects everything and everyone in our lives. It's always there, weighing us down and keeping us from achieving true happiness. But do you know God never meant for us to be trapped in the past? You can be free of your baggage. Learn how God's forgiveness leads to changed lives and new beginnings. Call the 700 Club.
I'm Ephraim Graham, and this is Studio 5. Cruise with me as I discover the good things happening in the world of music, sports, television, and movies.
The fact that Ryan Coogler was going to be directing the film, I knew that something special was going to happen.
We'll chat with artists at the forefront of entertainment and explore the connection between popular culture and faith.
I asked my pastor, I said, well, does that mean I'm supposed to be a preacher? He says, well, no, you already have a pulpit.
Watch Studio 5, Wednesday night at 9:30.
Tikkun Olam.
This is our nature as a country.
To make the world a better place.
Literally, we felt the earth shaking.
The Christian Broadcasting Network presents To Life, how Israeli volunteers are changing the world.
This film needs to be seen by everyone.
I was in tears.
Now you can own the inspiring documentary To Life on DVD.
There is blood on our hands if we know and we walk away.
I'm so grateful that this film was made.
To Life can be yours for a gift of $10 or more. Call 1-800-700-7000 or log on to cbn.com.
We know that every minute counts to save life.
It'll bless Israel, but it'll also bless all the friends of Israel.
Discover the untold story of how Israeli volunteers are making the world a better place. Call 1-800-700-7000 or log on to cbn.com to get your copy today.
Well, the ink on the U.S. Taliban peace plan is barely dry, and already we are seeing an uptick in the fighting between the two sides.
We're talking to a pair of Middle East experts about what got us into these so-called forever wars and whether this new agreement will help get us out. CBN National Security Correspondent Eric Phillips has the details.
The peace deal was signed about a week ago and was preceded by a 7-day reduction in violence in Afghanistan. One Middle East intelligence expert tells CBN News the effort is weak, although he admits it's time for U.S. troops to go.
Will 10-year-old Americans be in Iraq 10 years from now? Yes, unless we get it right.
Middle East intelligence expert Michael Pregent says the same applies to Afghanistan, where the U.S. has been fighting for 19 years across 3 presidential administrations. And Pregent tells us the main problem is not necessarily in the Oval Office.
It's not the decision makers that are keeping us in these forever wars. It's the experts that are advising them. They're advocating for their own portfolios. They're advocating for their contracts.
I think that's probably a black hole that we shouldn't go down.
John Hanna of Foundation for the Defense of Democracies says advisors are needed, but not necessarily running the show.
I wouldn't point the finger of blame at anybody in particular, or any group of people as being particularly sinister. I do believe this is a government that at the end of the day is commanded and run by people who are elected to office by the American people.
And Hanna says the American people are weary of this long-standing war. That's what he believes has propelled this deal between the U.S. and the Taliban, although he stops short of calling it a peace plan.
I just don't see that we have the conditions set right for a genuine peace deal. I think what we're creeping up towards is a better termed a withdrawal deal. This is a a deal that's being worked to try and get American forces out of Afghanistan without leaving behind a disastrous situation for the Afghan government and the Afghan people.
And while both sides agree that getting U.S. troops out of there is in their best interest, Hannah says with U.S. forces gone, the Taliban will work to take over the government. But he says there is one way the Taliban could prove that they have U.S. interests in mind as well as their own.
Taliban is also supposed to renounce and commit to fighting al-Qaeda and other terrorist groups in Afghanistan. If, in fact, the Taliban does come out publicly and renounce their alliance with al-Qaeda, which has been decades in the making, was critical in 9/11, that could be a mark that the Taliban maybe are more serious than I'm giving them credit for.
The peace plan calls for U.S. troops to be completely withdrawn from Afghanistan over the next 14 months. That's a point of controversy even among some of Trump's most loyal allies. But that's if the plan holds up. Right now, talks are stalling between the Taliban and Afghan government leaders, and that's a key part of the process. In Washington, Eric Phillips, CBN News.
Thank you, Eric. Well, coming up, we'll take a look at a unique rescue operation that is sure to leave you feeling a bit fuzzy inside. That's next.
It's the new Superbook Bible app. It's packed with games, activities, and Superbook episodes that you can watch for free. Oh, no! There's trivia, a fun daily devotional, and answers to your Bible questions. Plus, an easy-to-understand Bible the whole family will enjoy. You can even create your own Superbook character. Ta-da! It's the new Superbook Bible app. Free downloads on iTunes, Google Play, and Amazon.
From Washington, D.C., uncompromising stories, interviews, and analysis from veteran journalists David Brody.
Escalating fight.
Jenna Browder.
Chose his words carefully.
Ben Kennedy.
Plan to join him.
And Amber Strong.
For impeachment grows a little bit louder.
Bringing you the political news that matters.
We get out and tell the story of the progress that we're making in this country.
Watch Faith Nation, weeknights at 6 on the CBN News Channel.
We will move the American embassy to the eternal capital of the Jewish people, Jerusalem.
As the nations rage, you can stand with Israel.
History is being written, and I want to be a part of it.
Call 1-800-700-7000 and get to life.
This is our nature as a country.
Discover the untold story of how Israeli volunteers are changing the world.
We consider it our duty to reach out and help others around the world.
For a gift of $10 or more, you can own the acclaimed CBN documentary To Life.
To treat a human, no matter what he is, which religious he has, which color he is, this is what I'm doing.
Support Israel in their time of need. Get to Life, now available on DVD. Call 1-800-700-7000 or log on to cbn.com.
And I wish that other people throughout the world could see this side of Israel.
Finally tonight, Nashville recovery and cleanup efforts continue following this week's tornadoes, and some of the smallest victims are being welcomed in with open arms in Chicago.
Or we're talking about animal rescue group Paws Chicago. They picked up 23 homeless cats and dogs from a Nashville shelter Thursday night. The pets arrived at Paws Medical Center in Chicago this morning. The group focused their efforts on pets who were in the shelter before the storm hit to make room for those displaced by the tornadoes. Paws Chicago also dropped off medical supplies to the Nashville shelter. That is. Pets will receive medical care, treats, and will eventually be available at Paws Chicago Adoption Center. So you can pick them up very soon.
Oh, they're cute. They need help too.
Yep.
All right. That's going to do it for Faith Nation.
Have a good weekend.